Hey folks, I wanted to go over what's really going on with Ukraine. Why hasn't he destroyed Kiev? What's the real goal and objective? All of that stuff. Well, first, let's answer the Kiev question. Kiev is a very important part of Russian history. If Putin were to go in there and just massively destroy it with missiles, he might have major political problems with his own people and Russia in general. So, destroying Kiev was not probably ever an objective. Okay, did they hope for an early submission and all that? Yes. But what are the real motivations? Why is Russia headed into Ukraine, and why has all this happened? It has to do with power and influence and increasing the Russian GDP, all the while making it a more viable player on the Belt and Road Initiative of China's. Okay, that's what this is really about. And so, what is the main objective? It's southeastern Ukraine. If you look where they've put the bulk of their military now, and then if you draw a line across, it's pretty much southeastern Ukraine. Now, if you begin to look at that, what's important about southeastern Ukraine? Rare earth minerals and some of the richest farmland on the planet. Both. So, if you were a country like Russia with a small GDP compared to China and the US, 1/10 of the size, but you wanted to exude power and influence upon the world and make yourself a global player, what would you do? Okay. And that would be expand food production. Because what is food production going to give Putin? Okay. It's going to give him more power and influence over possibly African nations, isn't it? Or smaller nations that can't grow food. So, on that Belt and Road Initiative, possibly, right? So, may they not be able to gain more power and influence by only raising their GDP 10 to 15%? And that's really what Eastern Ukraine, southeastern Ukraine, will do for Russia. It will expand their GDP between 10 and 20%, depending on how they go at it. And that has to do, again, with rare earths and some of the richest farmland in the world. And now, if you become a bigger player on the food export market, that could hold influence over many smaller countries that have food problems. Okay. It also, if you control rare earths, China controls a lot of rare earths, Russia already does, but now they can control a lot more rare earth production. Okay. So that also will give more influence to Russia. Small GDP, but now having the ability to exert more influence upon certain regions of the world. Okay. So that's what really all of this is about. Had Putin left Ukraine alone, eventually Ukraine's GDP could have rivaled his or surpassed it. That's what's really going on, and they knew it. But by taking back southeastern Ukraine, they've just dropped Ukraine's GDP by 50% already. Okay, let alone how long it's going to take for them to recover. If they lose southeastern Ukraine, their ability to surpass Russia's GDP will never take place. Okay. And that's really what the whole Russian Ukrainian thing is all about, folks. In and of itself, what is it? It's about power, influence, and increasing the Russian GDP. And when you control southeastern Ukraine, you have some of the richest farmland in the world, some really important rare earth mineral depots. And that's why leveling some of these cities, okay, has not been part of, or has been part of the plan all along. By leveling many of these areas where people were living, that now allows them to just bulldoze those areas if this all should end and begin mining or growing food. Does that make sense? Okay, so by getting the population out of there, okay, it allows them to begin to mine some of that rare earth territory, doesn't it? And definitely take advantage of all that farmland that's already there. And it does a lot of things with regards to Russia's power and influence upon the world, doesn't it? That's what all this is really about. Expand the GDP, take control of two very important commodities, rare earths and food, make themselves a bigger global player. While their GDP isn't that big, now they're a bigger global player in two very important areas that the world currently needs now, food and rare earths. Okay, so that's what this whole thing is really about. Go look at a map of the rare earths on the planet and where they might be located and how much food production was coming out of southeastern Ukraine. all along, okay? And if you had a nation on your border you didn't trust, whose GDP could one day surpass your own, you might want to deal with that problem. Everything's been accomplished so far. We'll see how it winds up, how the borders are drawn when this is over, okay? That's also, go back to the Crimea. What was the Crimea really about? It was getting that port, a hold of that port that is part of the Belt and Road Initiative. Now he's just gotten another port, and he's also grabbed some of the richest land in the world with regards to rare earths and food production. So that will increase the Russian GDP one more time and give them more power and influence over smaller countries that might need food or rare earths, okay? And certainly by controlling more rare earths, that's been China and Russia's plan all along, to kind of debilitate the West, control the rare earth production, okay? At least that's what they thought. I may do another video later to show you how that's not going to work, but they think it will now, okay? So anyway, what is Russia and Ukraine really about? That's it, folks. You had a country whose GDP was growing at a pretty good clip, and it was someday possibly going to surpass his own, okay? And by attacking Ukraine, doing what he's done, he's eliminated that problem. He's taken control of some of the richest land in the world. He's going to expand his own GDP and power and influence over the world, since he has a small economy, but now his power and influence will be much more valuable to China and others, okay, as team player. So he's taken a small GDP, but he's turned influence probability way up, hasn't he? If he lords food and rare earths over other countries, okay? And as well as oil and gas, right, which you already know about. So that's what all this is really about. Try not to get too caught up in all the conspiracy theories and a bunch of ideas. In and of itself, what is anything, okay? Usually it's the simplest answer, and that's what this is really about. Power, influence, and to increase the Russian GDP a little bit and give them more influence on the world. That's what it's really about. If you're a small GDP country, you know, Russia's GDP wasn't even 1/10 of ours, okay? So how can you assert your influence on the world and make yourself a more valuable player in the world scheme of things? Well, simply take control of two very important things that the world needs. And that happens to be in eastern Ukraine, right? And by leveling a lot of buildings, now you can take in a bulldozer and you've gotten rid of the population. So you don't need to worry about getting people out of there. Now you can just bulldoze a bunch of places, start mining, or just take advantage of growing that food in that rich soil and make yourself a more powerful player on the global landscape, right? So that's what it's really about. Try not to complicate things. Try not to get caught up in all the conspiracy theories and people overthinking things. It's just about power, influence, increased GDP, profits. It's always what these politicians do in the end in countries. It's about GDP and profit for certain people within the scope of those nations, right? It's always what it's about, really. So Ukraine's been leveled and will not recover for a long time. Russia's GDP could grow significantly over the next 10 years as a result if they take southeastern Ukraine. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Hope you're all doing well, and don't get too caught up in all the craziness out there. Jim out.